And so seeing the future, seeing what's coming down the road, he acts. Now, he does it deceptively, but at least he does something. And that's the message that Jesus is trying to get across to us. He says, be a prudent planner when it comes to the future. Now, do it in all areas of our lives. But certainly, we are to do it in the area of our finances. And that's what this particular sermon is about today. It's why I've been invited to come to your church, which, by the way, you have a gorgeous sanctuary. I love it. I've heard of it going up. I've talked to Marlo as it's being built. But you have a gorgeous building in which to worship today. So when you came in today, you were handed a small booklet, which we're going to take some time to work through today. My hope is that at the end of this sermon, you'll be both better informed and better motivated to make some changes in your life, if needed, when it comes to how you deal with your money. So turn to, I think it's page 8. Page 6 is a quiz. You can take that at your leisure at some time, maybe this week. But we're going to start at page 8. Oh, the numbers are all messed up. Okay? So principle number 1 says find the spot marked X. So look for that. And if you have to go forward and backward through the seminar today, you'll still be able to follow along as long as you find the principle number. So principle number 1, find the spot marked X. You see, the very first thing that you need to do if you're going to make changes, positive changes in your financial world, is to find out where you are. That means you need to make a careful assessment of your present situation because it's really difficult to follow directions if you don't know where you are. So let's say you're in a new location for the first time. Maybe it's a large mall. You're not exactly sure where you are, and you certainly don't know the direction that you need to take to get to where you want to go. And so you may look for a sign, a kiosk that says, you are here. Because once you know where you are, you'll be able to better find the right path to go to where the store you're trying to get to. Well, it works exactly the same in our financial world. I may not like where I am. I may recognize that things aren't the way that I'd like them to be. And I may even have some idea of where I'd rather be than where I am. But until I know where I am, it's going to be extremely difficult to get to where I want to end up. And so there are 4 things that I need to do. Number 1, I need to be honest. If I'm lost, I need to admit it. I need to analyze my situation as it is, not as I wish it was. And so if my finances are in a mess today or they're not doing very good, it doesn't do me any good to pretend otherwise. Secondly, I need to be open. It's kind of like a time for show and tell. And if you're married, you need to sit down and you need to discuss where you actually are. Now, I would advise that you do that at a Tim Hortons because it's really hard to yell at your spouse in public. It might also be a time to ask someone who knows a bit more than you, can you give me some help, some ideas? Thirdly, you need to be thoughtful. Ask yourself the question, how did I end up here? What mistakes did we make? What good money principles did I somehow ignore? Or what did I miss in God's word that would have helped me to be in a better position? And lastly, it's okay to get emotional. It's okay to get worked up about your situation. Money is an emotional topic. Whenever I do pre-marriage counseling, I always take an entire session just talking about money. And it's interesting because there's always a saver and there's always a spender. I won't ask you to raise your hand to identify yourself today. I don't know if on this next slide, if this couple was having a discussion about money or not, but there's definitely some emotion in the room. And let me add this today. It's okay to look at where you are and even be scared at your situation. According to some stats from just 2 years ago, the average Canadian owes $21,000 each, excluding mortgage debt. Since my wife and I don't have any debt, that means our $42,000 is divided up amongst the rest of Canadians. In July of 23, just a year ago, it was reported that 46%, I think it's actually 49% now, of Albertans are less than $200 away from failing to meet their financial obligations. 72% say they are more concerned about their ability to pay their debts now than they were a year earlier. Another survey commissioned by the Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan in 23 said that more than 75% of Canadians between the ages of 55 and 64 who are not already retired have $100,000 or less in savings. Of those surveyed, 44% claimed that they had less than $5,000 saved. So it's okay to look at your situation and say, oh my goodness, this is not good. But it's okay to be hopeful as well. You see, the opposite emotional response to being scared is to be hopeful. Because for most people, there's still time to turn things around, to change direction, to work towards a better financial future. So you can change. Your situation can change. It will take work, it'll take discipline, but you can do it. I had a friend of mine, I think he's about 63, 64 years of age, came to me about a year ago and said, I am in trouble financially. I'm not sure what to do. So we looked at his situation as it is today. He adjusted some things. He made some changes. He's hoping to work till he's about 75 years of age. I just talked to him about 4 weeks ago, and the change from where he was to where he is today is dramatic because he began to look at things as they were, not as he wished them to be. So let me tell you about a very fundamental law of economics. If you want to find your spot marked X, you need to do a very simple financial exercise. It's called the OO law of finance. The first O is to determine everything that you own. You list everything that you have, all of your assets. The second O is to find out everything that you owe. Then what you do is you subtract what you owe from what you own, and that gives you what's called your net worth. Now, on page 21 of your manual, or whatever page it might happen to be, there's a very simple chart that allows you to do that exercise sometime in the very near future. Now, hopefully, this is not a time after you've completed that exercise that you say, uh-oh, I think I'm in some trouble. Now, on the screen, there's an example of what this person owns. They have some property, they have a cottage, they have some TFSAs, and their total is $448,800. That's what they own. But they also have some debts that they have to pay. And so they have still a mortgage, they have a vehicle cost. They actually owe their mother-in-law $8,000. They don't recommend you go that route, but in this case they did. And so they owe $238,000. So their net worth is $210,000+. Principle number 1, find out where you are today. Principle number 2, set some financial goals. Now, in order for a goal to be reached, there are 5 important criteria. They're on the screen, SMART. I'm not going to go through them. You can read them yourself. Can I add this, though? After determining what goals you want to have for yourself financially, write them down. One study determined that you are 42% more likely to achieve your goals when you write them down than when you don't. Just after my wife and I got married, we decided that we wanted to go to Europe. It was a dream of mine to go and see the Roman Colosseum. I loved history, loved Roman history in particular. And so we got a little glass jar. We decorated it with pictures from Europe. We put Europe on it. We put it on the top of our fridge. And every time we had some spare change, we put it in the container. Now, we knew that that spare change would never get us to Europe. But every time we were in the kitchen, there it was. It was reminding us we had a goal. And within 11 months of us putting that jar on the fridge, I was standing in front of the Roman Colosseum. We had written it down in a form, and we reached our goal. On page whatever it is in your manual, 17 in my book, there are some possible goals. Now, you may pick one of those. You say, that's a good goal. I'd like to reach that goal. Or if you don't see one that you would like to make up your own. Put it in your own words. Post it somewhere so that it will be a reminder to you. One of our goals later on in life was we want to pay our mortgage off by the age of. And we did it with a year to spare. Why? Because it was sitting in front of us all the time. Here's principle number 3. Once you find out where you are and you have some ideas of where you'd like to go, you need to create some financial plans in order to get from where you are to where you want to be. So let me highlight 4 possible plans or parts of a plan that you might institute in your life. Number 1, make a commitment to God. When I was about 8 years old, I got a quarter, 25 cents, for weeding the entire garden. Now, that was a lot of money back then, first of all, to a child, but also because it was a lot of money. And I tend to be rather careful with how I spend my money, and so I carried that quarter around with me for about a week and a half, trying to figure out where I should spend it. I took it to church with me on the weekend. And as the offering plate was being passed around, I sensed God so strongly wanting me to put that 25 cents in the offering. But I'd worked so hard for that quarter, and I knew the amount of candy that 25 cents would buy back then. And so being a very good pastor's kid, I let the offering plate go by, and I did not put my 25 cents in. But through the rest of the service, I just felt so bad about it, and God kept telling me. And so at the end of the service, I still remember it, my dad had just prayed the benediction before he even got off the platform. I ran up to him and said, "Dad, could you put this 25 cents in the offering?" Now, did God need my 25 cents? Was the church going to go broke if it didn't have it? If it was, the church was in deep financial trouble. But what God was wanting to do was to teach me a lesson about Him coming first in my finances. A couple of weeks later, I was walking through a store with my parents. I happened to look down, and I'm standing on a $1 bill. Now, I recognize that some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. It's not a loonie. It was an actual, like a $10 bill, but it's one. And I stood there, and I stepped on it, and I looked around. There's nobody else in the store. I picked it up, put it in my pocket, and the moment I saw it, the moment I picked it up, the thought came to me, these words: "You gave me your 25 cents. This is your blessing for being obedient." And we have proven that over and over and over again in our lives. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 3 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, including your money, and your plans will succeed." Here's a second thought: get help from informed people or reliable sources. Proverbs 21:5 says that plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. I'm not a mechanic. I know nothing about cars. I know where the gas goes, and that's about it. So when something goes wrong with my car, I seek out someone who knows more than I do about mechanics. If there's something wrong physically, I go to a doctor because he or she is the expert. And so over the years, I've tried to seek advice from those who know more than I do about financial matters. I have a friend in Edmonton. He's very wealthy. He's done extremely well in the business world. And every so often, I will phone him and say, "What do you think about this?" And he'll give me his advice. I have to determine whether I'm going to follow it, but at least I know something better now than I did before. Do you know that one of the best investments that you could probably make in your life is buy lunch for somebody who knows more about money than you do, pay for their meal, and then pepper them with questions about what to do? Here's a third thought. Invoke the old McDonald's law of economics. Now, what's that rule? Well, you may remember it, E-I-E-I-O. So you take your expected income, everything that you have coming to you on a regular basis in a month. You subtract from that all of the expenses that you normally occur, and that will give you the outcome. So on the screen, there's an example of this. In this case, all the income equals $5,798. They get wages, they get some interest, rental income, self-employment, $5,798. The next screen is the expenses incurred. So they give to the Lord. They have some household expense like we all do. They still owe a mortgage. They put some money away in an RSP, and their expenses are $5,798. Now, when you subtract the expenses from the income, in this case, there is 0. Now, your goal isn't to end at 0, but that should be the worst case scenario. Now, let's say that you do this exercise sometime this week, and you find that instead of ending at 0, you're in a negative position. That's when you implement the next law of economics called the Einstein law of economics. FIRE. Find income, reduce expenses. You see, there's only 2 ways to get out of financial trouble, to get out from a negative position. And the first one is to find more income. Many, many years ago, I was working on my master's degree. We lived in a small town. My salary was pretty low. And to pay for my master's degree, I made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little wooden toys and sold them at farmers markets in order to pay for my master's degree. My daughter picked up the same idea a couple of years ago and started collecting old dressers. And she would, some of them get for free or $20 or $30, and she would refurbish them, paint them, put new hardware on, and she would sell them up for upwards of $300 or $400. Find income. Maybe take an extra shift at work. Maybe take a part-time job until you've paid off some of your debts. Learn about investing so that you can create passive income. Passive income is money that you don't actually work for. So find extra income. If that doesn't work, then you do need to reduce your expenses. You see, if you're below 0, this is the only other way to get above 0. And there are dozens of ways of doing that. I'm going to list a few in a couple of minutes. Very achievable methods. Principle number 4 is manage your spending. For some people, not everybody, but for some people, the financial problem they have is not because they don't make enough money, it's because they don't manage well what they have. Or, if we use a biblical term, they're not stewarding their money well. They're not using their resources in a proper way. They need to learn better habits of spending. And in this area, there are 6 very important players that come into effect. Let me give them to you very quickly this morning. Number 1, God. We've already talked about this, but let me give you some verses that may remind you that God should always come first in our lives and even in our financial world. I'm not going to read all these verses, but Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God. God's going to give everything else to you that you need if you put him first. Malachi 3:10, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse so that God can then pour out a blessing upon you. 2 Corinthians 9:6-8. A person who sows sparingly is, guess what? They're going to reap sparingly. If you put 1 radish seed into the ground, don't expect 100 radishes. It doesn't work that way. If you sow generously, then you will also reap generously. And I love this last part. And God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Those verses remind us that when you put God first in your income, call it tithing, 10%, whatever you want to call it, that God will look after you. The second player is the Canada Revenue Agency. This little joke on the screen says this. If we can move first there. The next person, next, there we go. Dear Revenue Canada. And the next one. I am writing to cancel. Okay, I'll just tell you what it is. It's a little guy sitting at a desk, and he's saying, Dear Revenue Canada, and then he says, I am writing to cancel my subscription. Please remove my name from your mailing list. Wouldn't that be great if you could write CRA tomorrow and say, you know what, I've been thinking about this, and can you just take my name off? Don't send me any more bills. Don't want to owe you anything in the NCRA. Oh, really? Well, we haven't heard that one before. So yes, we'll take your name off our list. We know it doesn't work that way. The tax rates in Alberta range from 10 to 15% of your income. Combine that with the federal rate, somewhere between 25 and 48% is probably what most people pay. On top of that, there is fuel tax, GST tax, carbon tax, investment tax, property tax. Are you depressed yet? Aren't you glad you came to church? You could learn all about the taxes that you owe. You know what's going to happen, though? The CRA is going to get their money from you. You may not like it. You may find a few legal loopholes. But for the most part, they're going to get what they think is owed to them. And as Christians, we are to pay the taxes that we owe. But you know, there's some really good news in this whole area in Canada. It doesn't happen around the world, but it happens in Canada. The CRA actually encourages you to give to God. When you combine the federal charitable tax credit of 29%, Albertans, and we receive more than anybody else in Canada in our province, Albertans receive a 50% tax credit for every dollar donated to charity over $200. So if you give $100 to your church or $1,000 to your church, you're going to get almost exactly one half of it back. And the other good news on this is that today's tax laws allow for a person to receive tax credits for those who might give up to 75% of their income. Now, you're probably not there yet, but the government allows for that to happen. The third player is you and your family. The Bible tells us that we are responsible to take care of our families financially. So that involves working to have the money to look after them. It means good management of your finances in order to pay the bills. It means investing for the future, a whole number of different areas that we're responsible for. Now, one important way that we can provide for our family is to make sure that you have what is called a rainy day account. That means you should have in the bank somewhere between 3 to 6 months of income in case there's a catastrophic event that takes place in your life. So if you spend, let's say, $4,000 a month, that's your normal expenditure, that means you should have somewhere between $12,000 and $24,000 sitting in the bank put away for an emergency. And it's only for emergencies. And an emergency is not a trip to Hawaii in January when it's 30 below. That's just what we put up with in Canada, in Alberta. If you happen to use any of that money for an emergency, a real emergency, then you replace it as fast as you can. Proverbs 21:20 says this, "In the house of the wise are stores of choice foods and oils, but a foolish man devours all that he has." The fourth player is your employer. We all know that when you get your pay stub at the end of every 2 weeks or at the end of a month, there are a number of deductions on it. Some of them are listed on the screen. If you make $2,000, you may only get $1,500 for the work that you put in for the reasons that you see. Number 5 player, and this isn't for everybody, but for some, it's the creditors. Proverbs 22 verse 7 says, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." Do you know that debt is one of the killers of wealth creation and good money management? Now, that doesn't mean all debt is bad. I would say most of it is. And one of the main reasons that debt is bad is because of the interest you have to pay for the privilege of spending money that you don't have. So how do you get yourself out of debt if you happen to find yourself there? Because the Bible says that continuing to do something that has proven dangerous in the past is just a foolish endeavor. Proverbs 22:3 says, "A prudent man sees danger and takes refuge. The simple keep going and suffer for it." So here are 4 ways to get out of debt today. Stop credit card spending. Studies show that you will spend somewhere between 12 and 15% more if you use a credit card rather than cash. So make yourself this rule. The first month that you cannot pay off your credit card entirely, cut it up. And don't use it again until you can put that into operation. So use cash. A few weeks ago, my wife and I use credit cards for everything. We get 2% back on everything we spend, so it just makes sense. But I didn't want to use my credit card. I had a $50 bill in my pocket. It had been sitting there for a long time in my wallet, so I decided to use it. I pulled it out, and I gave it to the cashier, and she took it, but I did not want to let go of it. It was $50. It was real money. And so just for a second, there was a bit of tug-of-war as she's trying to pull this $50 out of my hand, and I finally let it go. But it reminded me, wow, it's so much harder to pay with cash than it is with a credit card. Number 2, pay off your debts with the highest interest rates first. Usually, that is a credit card debt. Somewhere between 22 to 24% is what most people are paying today if you don't pay it off. And so if you have a lot of debt, you may want to look at consolidating all of that together into one manageable debt, which will usually lower your payments. I had a gentleman talk to me about 3 years ago, came to me after the service. He said, man, I'm in real trouble. I know you know a little bit about money. What do I do? We talked a bit about it. I suggested go to your bank, consolidate everything, put it into one lower interest rate, and within about a year, he had it all paid off. Number 3, contact your creditors. Now, if you're in real financial difficulty, talk to your creditors before they talk to you. I've often suggested this, and it's interesting how creditors, they're surprised that anybody would ever phone them and say, hey, I know I'm in trouble, what can I do? And they're actually usually more willing to work with you and help you if you contact them, if you're proactive. They don't want to chase you down. It costs them money to do that. And when you phone them first, it proves that you care enough to deal with the debts you've piled up. And then number 4, consider some lifestyle adjustments. You see, to get from where you are to where you want to be, you're most likely going to have to make some changes in your lifestyle, that which you've become accustomed to. So let me just give you some ideas on that. Number 1, stop any form of borrowing. All debt is bad, except in the case of borrowing for appreciable items like a house or an education or sometimes some investing you have to be really careful about. That's called leveraging. You don't want to get yourself in trouble. Number 2, develop a budget. I won't ask how many of you have budgets today, but probably about half of Canadians do and half don't. There's a sample budget on one of the pages of your manuals. If you have debt, work out a payback plan. Talk to your creditors, ask for some help in money management, start somewhere, even if it's small. And then exercise some self-discipline. Can I just give you a few ideas that can actually change your financial world? Number 1, don't buy it the day you see it. You go to a store, you see a piece of clothing, a new TV, whatever, and you say, oh, I'd love one of those, and it looks so good. Don't buy it that day. Go home, and in 24 hours, you'll either forget about it or say, I didn't really want it anyway. Number 2, pay with cash. I've already talked about that. Here's another one. Don't buy beverages when you go out for dinner. Instead, take that money, invest it. After 40 years, you'll have $170,000 in your account. This happened to me a few months ago. I was at a church. The pastor afterwards had preached this message, shared this, don't buy beverages. He said, some of us are meeting at a restaurant after. Do you want to come? And I said, yeah, we'll do it. So I got there a tad late. They're all sitting around. I sat down. The server comes around and says, so what can I get you for drinks today? Everybody looks at me and says, not today. No, just water, thank you. I don't know if they've continued to do that. My wife and I never buy beverages with the meal unless it comes with it. Learn to do it yourself. YouTube has everything on it. You don't have to pay for somebody, an expert, to do it. You can become an expert. Use the library instead of buying books. We just bought a Kobo, and so we can download all these books onto our Kobos and take it with you instead of taking a pile of books when we go on holidays. Don't go to movies. Wait till they come out in video. Now, if you really have to go to a movie, don't buy popcorn. They mark it up 1,275%. So my wife and I, if we ever do go to a movie, it's with a really big coat like I'm wearing today. Not kidding. We put pop in there, we put chips, we put chocolate bars, and we walk in. We walk out a little lighter in our coat, a little heavier in the stomach, but we do not buy anything if we're going to go to a movie. And then we also do something. We've done this for about the last 15 years called Frugal February. The reason we chose February is because there's only 28 days usually. My wife she's not here today, so I can say this. She's a bit of a shopper. If you're listening, Pat, I'm sorry. She's a bit of a shopper. No, she's not, kind of over the top, but she does like shopping. So we picked Frugal February because there's only 28 days. During those 28 days, we do not buy anything unless we absolutely have to. We don't go out for coffee, we don't go out for dinner, we don't buy magazines, we don't go to theaters, we don't buy clothes, we don't buy anything except what we absolutely have to do. What that does is it teaches you self-discipline. Now it's long. 28 days is a long day or a long month when you can't buy anything. But at the end of that 28 days, there's something called self-discipline that's instilled in you. And if you're self-disciplined in one area, usually that will spill over to another area of your life. The last player is your neighbors. Do you know there was Christianity that taught the world about charity? Our belief in giving and being generous comes from a God who gives, for God so loved the world. The story of the Good Samaritan. Proverbs 11, 24 to 25. If it wasn't in the Bible, I would not believe it. It is possible to give away and become richer. It is possible to hold on to too tightly and lose everything. Yes, the liberal man shall be rich by watering others, he waters himself. Lots of ways to do that. Sponsor a child. Give a little bit to charity and when there's a need that comes up in the church. Buy a Christmas hamper. Whatever it might be, learn to give. Which brings us to principle number 5, plan for your retirement. Now, before I say anything else, it's always good to talk to a wealth consultant, people who know this inside and out. Do you know that in 1980, there were 6 people working for every person collecting pensions? In the year 2030, which is only 5 years away, there'll only be 3 people in Canada working for every person that's retired. That should send us a very strong message that just relying on CPP and OAS by itself is maybe not the best decision to make. So here's a few ideas to consider. Start with an RSP. Of course, an RSP, the advantage of it is you get to defer paying taxes today on whatever you invest with the idea that when you take your money out, when you retire, you'll be in a lower income bracket, and so you'll be paying less taxes. Number 2, take advantage of compound interest. Einstein said compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. Compound interest simply means that you're gaining money not just on the principal investment that you've made, but on the interest that you've gained on that same investment. And so over a number of years, you are gaining interest on interest on interest on interest, and it kind of becomes like the proverbial hockey stick. Starts out very, very slow on a graph, and then all of a sudden it starts to take this upward slope, and that's called compound interest. Invest in mutual funds. Talk to somebody about it, a wealth advisor. Investigate the value of TFSAs. I think that TFSAs is the best gift that the government of Canada ever gave to Canadians. The advantage is that whatever you make on a TFSA, interest, dividends, whatever, you will never pay taxes on that. So if you buy stock at $10 and it goes up to $100, that's a 90% increase. Normally you would pay capital gains on the $90. A TFSA says you will never pay taxes on the increase of that amount. You can contribute, I think it's $77,000, $7,500 a year. Average Canadian right now, about $100,000 because it's cumulative. If you haven't used it, start thinking about it. And number 5, consider kingdom investments. Such as PAOC gift annuities. An annuity is simply a contract between you and another party, in this case the PAOC. You give them a certain amount of money. In return, you get a regular interest payment that's based on your age. You can also do gift securities, or if you're in a higher bracket, you can also look at something called a PAOC foundation. And then principle number 6. Do the final touches, which we call estate planning. It's on page of your manual. Now, this is a serious topic because we're talking about death. We're talking about not being here anymore. So maybe a little bit of humor is in order. Here's a guy sitting in front of, on a chair with his wife, and he says, just so you know, I never want to live in a vegetative state dependent on some machine. If that ever happens, just unplug me, okay? So principle number 6, estate planning. Now, it's really important for us to plan for the present, but we also need to plan for the future. First of all, it potentially a time in which you may not be able to make decisions for yourself anymore. Dementia, Alzheimer's, maybe a coma that you happen to be in because of a car accident. Second thing you need to do is plan for your death. That's where estate planning comes into the picture. There's two key areas that you need to be concerned about. A time in which you may be incapacitated, you cannot make decisions for yourself. At that point, it's really wise to have a substitute decision maker, or what we call a power of attorney. You need that in two areas. First of all, you need it in your health area. When you cannot make health decisions anymore, you need somebody to make that for you. And secondly, in regards to your finances. In order to do that, you need to have a primary power of attorney. If you're married, it's going to be your spouse. And then you need an alternate, either a child of age or somebody else. The second area in which we can help you this coming week is in preparing a will. Do you know that according to an Agnes Reed poll in 2018 and then also 2023, just a year ago, 69% of people between the ages of 35 and 44 do not have a will. 49% between the ages of 45 and 54 do not have a will. And people who do have their will, 13% said it's out of date. Many people say they don't have a will because it just costs too much. Well, as you've already heard, we're going to do it for absolutely free this weekend or this week. Other people are scared that if they make a will, they will die within 2 weeks. That is not correct. So far, I've done hundreds and hundreds of wills. Only one person has died, and that is because they had terminal cancer, and that's why they were making their will. Other people believe it's only for the elderly. No, it's for everybody over the age of 18. And too many people think there's lots of time to plan for this in the future. Yeah, right. Listen to what James 4 says. Now listen, you who say today or tomorrow, we're going to do this or go to that city, spend a year here, there, carry on business, make money. You don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. What's your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. So when do you need a will? If you're over the age of 18, you say, I don't really own anything. You'd be surprised at what 18-year-olds own. If you've been recently married or divorced, even if you have a will, you need to get a new one. If there's special family concerns, if your old will doesn't reflect your current thinking. Maybe you want to redo your will if it doesn't provide for something for the Lord's work. If you're a new parent, you need to have a will. You do not want the government or the courts deciding where your children will go. Now, they're not going to give them to a homeless person, but they may give them to a relative that you don't want them to go to. And so you get to choose now who will become the guardian for your children. What are some of the advantages of having a will? Well, it avoids family conflict at an emotional time. You know, you always hear these people say, oh, we would never fight over money. Oh, not us. We're not like that, until there's money to fight over. It controls your assets. You get to say today where your money goes. It can certainly help to provide for special circumstances. It secures the future of your minor children as money gets put into a trust for them. It allows you to make provision that maybe some of your assets will go to the Lord's work, and it might allow you to save some money, tax money in regards to your estate. Some questions to ask. Who's going to be the primary and secondary executor of your will? Not the executor, the executor. Who will be the guardians of my minor children? How do I want my assets distributed? Would I like to give a charitable percentage to help the work of God? I don't know whether heaven's going to be like this or not. My wife and I just redid our will about 1.5 years ago. We've always had money in it for the kingdom of God, and I know what my kids are going to do when we're gone. They're going to open up the will and say, I knew it. My parents gave to God when they're alive. They're going to give to them when they're dead, and so we do. But this is kind of how I imagine heaven. Every so often, I'm going to be able to kind of look over and say, look what my money's doing. Kids are getting saved. Kids are going to youth groups. Somebody's going to go to Bible college. A missionary is being helped, all because I left something to the work of God. It's kind of like a reverse compound interest. It keeps working after you are gone. So you might want to do that. And you have to ask yourself, am I going to do it myself? Am I going to get one of those will kits? I've met so many people who bought will kits, and they filled their name in at the top, and they haven't done anything with it since. I'm sure nobody here is like that. There are two kinds of wills that we can help you with. A traditional will in which you say, I don't want to give anything to charity, and that's totally your choice. You can see on the screen, if you die, it goes to your spouse. There's an estate created. You pay your debts and taxes. You have some legal fees to pay, and then the rest of your estate is distributed to shares of family and friends. Then we also do what is called a charitable will. It's almost exactly the same, except in this case, you decide, in this case, this person says, I'm going to give 10% to charity. That means they will get back 50% of what they gave, at least a 50% tax credit of what they gave, comes back to offset their capital gains and employment taxes in the year that they were living. And so their kids will get a little bit less, but the kingdom of God benefits greatly. Here's a question for you. How long do you think it takes for a beneficiary to spend his or her inheritance? The average inheritance is spent in less than 6 months. Now, some of that's good. Some people take their entire inheritance and pay their mortgage off. Great decision. But other people just spend it on a whole bunch of toys, and then it's gone. And it's like this. I worked hard. I think I'm frugal. I worked hard for my money. And yes, my kids are going to benefit. They're going to be fine. But I'm going to tell them, if you waste my money, I'm coming back to haunt you. So just be very careful on this. That's unbiblical, by the way, just in case you didn't know that. You're going to report me to the superintendent, I know. He believes in haunting. No, he doesn't. Okay. Anyway, a charitable will recognizes, if you decide to give to charity, and we'll talk about this, I'm not going to berate you, but when we sit down and ask you, do you want a traditional or charitable? A charitable will recognizes the blessing of God that you've received throughout your lifetime. It expresses a good steward philosophy of life. It demonstrates your values to the family members that are left behind. It provides a sense of self-satisfaction. I'm giving to the work of God. It can build a legacy long after you're gone from this earth. And it can help offset some taxes that the government will want. Which brings us full circle back to kind of where we started. These important verses given to us by Christ. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And let me quote one more verse today as I close. You've been faithful with a few things. I think all of us would want to hear this. God speaking to us. You've been faithful with a few things, including money. I'm going to put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. So after the service, there's going to be a long lineup. I think that's what you said. You can sign up. I'm going to be here today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If there's a waiting list, I'm going to try and come back the following week for a couple of days, because then we're going on a cruise. Sorry about that, but just have to do it. And when you sign up, you come to your appointment, make sure you have a substitute, primary, make sure that you have a guardian for your kids if you have minors, all those things that are in your booklet. Please read those before you come. Make sure you get those done so that we don't have to, kind of make the time together a little bit longer. And just in case you missed it, we're going to create a will for you. We're going to create 2 power of attorney documents, and we're not going to charge you a cent. God bless you. Thanks for having me come today.
That is really good stuff. Frugal February, I like that. Just got me thinking, I wonder if there's a title similar to that would cover the whole year, so we have a way to describe how Miriam lives. And I'm blessed because of it. I'm blessed, I'm just saying. Can tell who that spender saver is, but I've morphed her direction over many years of marriage, so thank God. Murray, thank you so much. And we'll talk in a moment, just a few more minutes if you can hang on. We'll talk about the will writing appointments, and I'll give you strict direction there. But first, just a few things that we need to do. It's a busy time. What we need to do right now is we need to ask for help this morning. The ladies' banquet planning team in the gym is in need of 5 or 6 guys to help set up, guys, ladies, whoever would be willing, to set up tables and chairs right now. 180 ladies coming tomorrow night to the banquet. And some of those ladies are not connected in a church. And maybe the Christmas message is a little bit new for them. But anyway, just church family, be praying into that. So I'm going to do this old school here. And then I'm going to ask Allie to stand, and she's going to love me for that because she's in charge of Christmas decorating and needs a bit of help this afternoon. We want to put some Christmas trees around the building. And so there's opportunity for a little while after the lineup. Or if you're not doing that, then this is something for you too. So first of all, 5 or 6 individuals who could help with table and chair setup in the gym for the banquet. Anybody right now? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is great. Thank you very much. Good. Appreciate that so much. And Allie, would you stand? Thank you for your work and the family, actually. It's a family project every year for Christmas decorating when we were back in the gym. And so you can meet Allie in the, very appropriate to do that. Express appreciation. And you'll meet the individuals in the gym, you said, right? Okay, so a few to help, and you can stay for as long as you can. Maybe you can only stay 20 minutes. That would be great. If you can stay a little longer, fine. But anybody like putting up Christmas trees and willing to help Allie after church here right now? Okay, got 1, 2. Good, thank you. 3, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Newcomers, there's a place for you to meet somebody or a couple that would love to meet you. Out the door, down the hall, you can ask questions about the church there. There's a newcomers lounge. Take your I'm New card that's in the chair pocket in front of you and fill that out and give that there, and you can you get a voucher for specialty coffee at our cafe. How do I say that? Cafe. I say that weird, don't I? I've been mocked by a couple of people this week for the way I say cafe. Cafe. Now I can't think how you're supposed to say it, but opportunity to connect there as well. Compliment or free coffee is free brewed coffee is there as well. And one more thing, Pastor John gave me a note here. There's a connecting opportunity up in the lounge right now. Lots going on, hey? So hope you're planning to stay around. Young adults, 18 to 30. There's no child care, but the family room will be open up here. But up in the lounge area upstairs, some food is going to be provided. If you're able to stay and you're in that age category, please do. You're welcome. Just an opportunity to help gain a sense of belonging or cultivate a sense of community in our church for you, and take advantage of that. So these 1 hour appointments-ish with Murray. There's 4 of them today. First one is at 2:30. And then there's 7 through the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, starting at 9:30. And the last one is 7:30 in the evening. So that's what you're going to see on the sign-up table along the orange wall, the black cutout in the wall there. We need to do this. When I pray, when I say amen, it's going to be fun to watch, you know. Anyway, please line up against the far wall, along the wall, as opposed to getting to the table. So, whoever it is first out there will start on this end and work this way down the table to pick the spot, okay? And again, there is that wait list that will be there. Did I miss anything in terms of direction? Okay. Lord, thanks for this word we've heard today. We want your wisdom, Lord, in this area of our lives. And we're grateful that your word informs this so much. We trust you in these things. In Jesus' name, amen. Miriam and I did this with a different individual about 5-6 years ago in our church, and did the same thing as Murray did with the charitable will, and just found it to be a really cool thing to be able to do. So God bless you. Have a great rest of the day.